I'm muted. Do you have your sound off?
Who's not muted?
It says I'm not.
Sorry, we're just having a problem with muting the computer here. Okay, I apologize for the delay. Ron Anthony. Ron Anthony is not here. Julia Tella. Julia Tella is not here. Kim Britt. Kim Britt is not here. Amber Brown. Amber Brown is not here. Molly Bruner. Molly Bruner is here. Carter Deers. Carter Deers is here. Jessica Frolick.
Here.
Jessica Frolick is here. Michelle Frisbee. Michelle Frisbee is not here. Cami Gens. Cami Gens is here. Kevin Glass.
I'm here. Just to know, we can't hear anybody that's at the table.
I just have a bummer. Yours is red too. Hi, can you hear me, Kevin?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Kevin Glass is here. Nicholas Henderson. I can see you, Nicholas. Can you unmute yourself? He's there. Yeah. Nicholas Henderson is here. Sorry, Corey Cohen. Here.
And can you, before you move on, I apologize. Can you hear me now?
We can, thanks.
All right, I apologize. I had the wrong mic selected.
Corey Cohen is here. Don Lanoy.
Here.
Don Lanoy is here. Marlon Manzaros. Manzaros is not here. Kelly Mitchell.
Here.
Kelly Mitchell is here. Kurt Mortensen.
Here.
Kurt Mortensen is here. Becca Muscat. Becca Muscat is not here. John Priam.
John needs to be elevated.
John needs to be elevated. Just 1 second. John, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. Toby Stevens. Toby Stevens is not here. Lane Sutherland. Lane Sutherland is not here. Rhonda Van Schoolhoven.
Rhonda is here.
Thank you. Jennifer Verdea. Jennifer Verdea is not here. Barb Weckman-Brecky.
Here.
Barb Weckman-Brecky is here. And we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Don. Next, we'll approve minutes and agenda approval. So any additions or corrections for the minutes and also any agenda items? If not, I would like to hear a motion for approval of minutes and agenda.
Is this a combined motion for approval, or are you taking individual? Sorry. A combined motion for both the agenda and the minutes? If so, I so move.
Yes, thank you. Looking for a second.
I'll second. Nick Henderson.
Thank you.
No,
Don?
I read that, I would know.
Molly Bruner.
Aye.
Carter Deers.
Yes.
Jessica Frolick.
Yes.
Cami Gens.
Aye.
Cami Gens was a yes. Kevin Glass.
Aye.
Glass is a yes. Nicholas Henderson.
Aye.
Nicholas Henderson is a yes. Corey Cohen.
Aye.
Corey Cohen is a yes. Don Lanoy.
Aye.
Don Lanoy is a yes. Kelly Mitchell.
Yes.
Kelly Mitchell is a yes. Kurt Mortensen.
Aye.
Kurt Mortensen is a yes. John Priam.
Yes.
John Priam is a yes. Rhonda Van Schoonhoven.
Yes.
Rhonda Van Schoonhoven is a yes. Barb Weckman-Brecky.
Yes.
Barb Weckman-Brecky is a yes. That is a unanimous vote.
We'll just note for the record that it looks like Julia Tella is present, but she's unable to use her microphone and camera today. So she'll mostly be listening in and chatting. All right. So next item on the agenda is the risk and needs policy. It's a discussion around that. We have actually a couple of things to talk about there. One of them is the implementation of the policy and a new issue that's come up with implementation. It's just to remind everyone the policy went into effect on July 1. And then our risk and needs group has also been meeting to talk about the LSAR validation and just has a report to give us today. So where do you think it makes the most sense to start?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. Maybe on the implementation of the policy since it's live.
Okay. All right. So we'll go for the implementation of the policy. And Molly, is this one that you want to bring up?
Sure.
The topic.
I can start it off anyway. So
Yeah.
this particular policy, as we voted, included doing a screener on all targeted misdemeanors. And we all vetted it, and on the surface, again, it seemed fine. And we went to go for implementation. And one of the offenses on the targeted misdemeanor list is misdemeanor DWIs. And what then we started to unpack, as many jurisdictions, not all, do not have an automated risk or pre-screener assessment for these. Some jurisdictions do. And for those of us, and I'll use myself as an example, Scott County uses the LSIRSV, which is the pre-screener for the LSCMI, which comes at a cost to each jurisdiction. And I was trying to figure out the exact amount, but I believe it's nearer $2 or something a piece. Most misdemeanor DWIs tend to be low risk, and many jurisdictions, again, like Scott County, does not do the pre-screeners on misdemeanor DWIs. And so for some jurisdictions, that could be hundreds, upwards of thousands of those that may happen at any given time. When you do one of those pre-screeners, you also have to do an interview because it's not automated. So not only is there a fiscal note that was unanticipated for many counties that we weren't prepared for, it also is a huge staffing lift to do, potentially hundreds, and then for really big jurisdictions, perhaps thousands of interviews that you weren't currently doing. And so it created, just caused us to pause and want to have a conversation about that, and wondering, since the policy went into effect on July 1st, we wanted to discuss that here at CSAC. I think that we all, from a philosophical perspective, understand the importance of doing a pre-screener. There are times, very rare, but there are times that a misdemeanor DWI could be like medium or high, and you'd want to do a full LSCMI for sure. And so when we have an automated pre-screener, that makes the conversation a little bit moot, because we'll do a screener on everyone, and then we'll do the, full assessments when it indicates the need to do so. But in the interim, looking for like maybe a bridge or some sort of, I don't know what the word would be, but variance maybe, and putting that into our comp plans, that we're willing and wanting to work on that, but we really want to, focus in on getting that pre-screener so that we can do it, that we're able to do it without additional costs, to tax levy, and as an example, and or more staffing that we don't have. So that's kind of the, and if anybody else has more to add from their perspective.
Any other comments or discussion? I mean, one thing that I will say is that when we go through where we're at with all the deliverables and the sequencing and everything like that, I think we all thought we had a shot at having a pre-screener in place by now. So when we were drafting the policy, we also had a subcommittee working on what would it take to develop a pre-screener. And then our staff at DOC was going to take the lead on that, working with some of the staff from other agencies that have the larger research entities as well, to try to develop a tool that could be used. And that hasn't progressed very quickly. And that's, I think, mainly on the DOC side because of the fact that we then also got the directive at the last session to begin closing Stillwater. So that became like an all hands on deck project, because we had to get the population down to half of its capacity within a few short months. So that became we needed data to be able to do that and to responsibly move our resources around the state. So that really put a strain on our research department. And I would say that's why they haven't been able to prioritize this project. Recently, we had a discussion, and Grant Dewey indicated that he thought he would be able to have sort of a first run at the pre-screener ready by maybe October. But I think there's still work to follow that, it's my understanding that just means the subcommittee gets the information back to see what that could look like and how it might work. So there would still be some work to implement after that, like if we decide that's something we want to implement. So the timing has not been great. I think is the long and the short of it here. So I just wanted to put that information out there. What other thoughts and comments do people have on this one? Cammy.
So I agree. Pre-screener is going to be extremely helpful with this population. To do a full LCMI on the majority of fourth degree DWIs is just way too time consuming. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Pre-screener, absolutely. I will note that this population we should pay attention to this population. How you get a gross misdemeanor DWI could be a result of a fourth degree DWI. And how do you get a felony DWI? Gross misdemeanor as well, or the numbers within a certain time frame. And we've seen from the last legislative session, more restrictions are being placed on DWI offenses. And so I think this, if we're providing supervision and receiving funding for this population, we should be doing something. And if not, then the courts could always place them to court probation and not beyond with departments. I would argue that's not a good call on that point, because public safety is number one. And some of these people, like especially if residential treatment is recommended in a no use and testing condition, then we should be monitoring them. Probation should be monitoring those clients. I would say the majority of them are going to fall under, low risk, but even low risk individuals do move up. They can relapse. They can continue to drink or use drugs or whatever their substance of use is, which could potentially result in another DWI, where if probation was involved, maybe we could have prevented that or helped them get resources. And so, but I think starting with having a pre-screener for everybody to use, I think that is a good starting point. And so it definitely supports getting more momentum behind getting a pre-screener in place for agencies to use.
Cammie.
So I was just gonna say that I do have some concerns too about the misdemeanor DWI in that does tend to be a pretty high caseload number for most jurisdictions. I mean, Aiken County, just as an example, we're notorious for DWIs and drug offenses. That's basically the gist of our caseload. And so, you know, we can't obviously just change the policy and say we're not going to do that, but we can make steps to do that if in the course of the next bit of time here can, you know, if we try it out and see where it goes, and does it shift our staffing around in order to be able to do those? Does it take a substantial amount of time to be able to do those? And then the end result is they're all low in administrative potentially is one outcome. You know, then down the road, do we shift that and go, okay, well, we're not going to include that anymore? So I think there's some, even going back to the main risk assessment piece of it and not jumping ahead to that topic, but taking some time to feel those things out and pilot some of those changes before we put it into policy, I just think is a good idea, because I have a feeling that down the road, we're going to end up having to come back and modify some things anyway. And that's always sort of been the thought. These are working, living, breathing things that at some point we need to shift with what we need as a state. So that's just my 2 cents.
Sorry.
Just for clarification, on Molly's point, are you specifically referring to the targeted misdemeanor DUI population only? Because the policy does address gross misdemeanors and other, domestic assault as part of that targeted group as well. So just to be clear for the record here, that's what you're talking about?
Correct.
Misdemeanors.
Only misdemeanors on that.
Misdemeanor
Correct.
DUI offenses.
Yep.
Okay.
Not, I think that was something that, just generally speaking, again, at the kind of the MECAC discussion was typically when we talked about keeping in targeted misdemeanors, it's because a lot of the other ones tend to be person offenses,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So it was one of those that just, I think that's in our brains because that's usually what we mean when we're saying that.
Mhm.
And then missing the fact that, oh, we didn't do that extra analysis that also is one as we were thinking about this particular policy's implementation. So really it's only specifically those DUIs.
And it's the misdemeanor level only, not the gross misdemeanor level? Is that
Correct.
okay?
Yep.
Just very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the DOC or what's the DOC experience with this, Carter?
We're doing pre-screeners on all misdemeanor DWI. So I'm listening at this point, obviously. So it's kind of unfair to say that, oh, we should just do it without listening to other people's concerns. And it sounds to me like it's less about necessarily administering the pre-screener. It's more about the time taken to do the entire interview, whereas that isn't the practice. And I've talked to some jurisdictions who have called me and kind of told me about this. So I think, in my understanding, is it's I don't disagree with Kevin at all, and I don't disagree with you, but it sounds like is there a bridge or is there a way to get to where we want to go? Philosophically, we believe that pre-screener, and the purpose of a pre-screener is to take less time to do to catch these folks, to Kevin's point, that are the handful of people that are potentially should be pulled out. They're higher risk than the offense initially would lead us to believe, and that's the purpose of doing risk needs responsivity assessments anyway. And so if the question is what's our experience, we're doing pre-screeners on everybody. Folks out there doing LSCMIs on them if need be.
And I truly don't know. So what do you use as a pre-screener for DOC?
We're using the Wisconsin right now for the pre-screener.
So automated and free.
It's not automated, but it's free.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking, so like when people, because I know like Hennepin has their own internal pre-screener automation, right? So like, great. And if I had one or a lot of other jurisdictions did, I think this wouldn't be again, philosophically, we want that because then we can do all of this and we're fine. So it's really just a temporary, how to help some of us that don't have that or are using things that cost money to get to the point where we can all do this. So that's, I mean, I don't want to sound like we're not in favor of doing this in the long term.
I think that the sort of there's sort of two layers here. We've already put the policy in place, so the policy is out there. The place that I've heard some concern is comp plans. And if people are not following the policy, then how can their comp plan come in line with existing policy? And what I've said to individuals that have contacted me about that is, just like we do with our clients, like we're not expecting perfect compliance on day one. Like the comp plan does always say, if you're not doing this now, like what are the steps or what's your process or plan for getting to yes, basically. So there's room in that structure to report on this type of issue and talk about it in that way, without changing the policy right now. So I just want to put that out there as like a reality. The other, I guess the question would be, the questions I have are like, how many counties are actually affected by this, like unable to do it at this stage? And what is the ask, or what is the ask?
What's the proposal?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know how many counties
don't
are
know.
affected.
If we didn't take like a,
So is that typically capacity related when you say the counties that are impacted, or describe that a little more?
Yeah, well, I'm just hearing DOC is doing it. So we have about 50 counties. So that means that we're doing it in our 50 counties. I hear Kevin saying that they're doing it. Kevin, actually, how many counties might be affected on the CPO side would be the question for you or for Rhonda. And then Cami and Molly, if you had an idea of how many counties were affected on the CCA side, then that might be helpful too.
I also think that since we don't have a common agreement on what pre-screener risk assessment should do, that complicates it. So, another question is the Wisconsin or the WISC, do you have to do an interview, or is it like static data? So you do the interview. So like every pre-screener has different, like probably needs, right? And the thing is, I
Right.
wouldn't want to ask for more if I'm just waiting for the automation of the risk assessment. So if I have 250 more people I have to interview a year, and it costs me $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, I need a staff in that. But I really don't. If we just have the automated risk assessment, then it's a moot point, because I'm only going to have to do the full LSCMI on some, which we'd be able to figure out. So that's where I'm just trying to figure out. It's almost just like waiting a little bit longer, hopefully, for that automated risk assessment tool. Hopefully it kind of answers this whole thing.
So some CPO counties are doing the full LCMI on that population. Some are using a pre-screener. I think that will vary between counties, and some are kind of waiting because they're hearing that there is a pre-screener coming, are kind of waiting for that pre-screener to come before they start really implementing those. So I think we really need, all CPO definitely supports getting more momentum behind a pre-screener that we could utilize, and myself included. I think that'd be extremely helpful.
Were you going to say something, Carter?
I'm good.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I was going to say is, I think we also knew when we proposed the risk assessment policy that we were not there with the only common tool we have right now is the LSCMI, but we've been taking the incrementalist approach, like let's get in place something, and then let's make it better. So getting in place the requirement to use a risk assessment or a screener is our something. We don't all have the same tools right now, but we have a long-term goal to try to get there if we can. And to have the same standards and to have the same cutoff points. And like all of those things are layers that we are trying to ultimately get to. And in the meantime, you know, I think we all thought we all understood that we are going to have those differences. Those differences are going to continue until we get there, but we have a vision and we're trying to go for it. So what I would say is like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, let's, you know, keep trying to slowly move forward, and totally open to hearing any challenges, and what, you know, if we can collectively figure out a way to address those challenges, then we should, right? But you know, like I'm in the camp of don't move backwards if we don't have to, just because we're not in that perfect spot. So, you know, so Molly, in your case, I would probably expect to see a comp plan from Scott County saying, like, we want to implement this. We don't have the resources right now, but we know that a pre-screener is in development and we're waiting for that, or something. You know, we plan to implement when that pre-screener is made available, or something along those lines. That's one way to keep moving forward. If you're looking for the policy to be lifted or changed or something, then that's something that would have to go back up through the commissioner, because that is where the policy authority comes from. So that's why I say, like, what's the ask here? Like, what do we want to do? And maybe we also do want to hear the risk assessment update in the meantime, and like hear that and get all the information on where we are before we come back to this. It's up to you. It's up to you.
Well, I would just say, I think the ask is not that we would redo the whole policy at this point, because I think it is positioned well to work well when we have that automated pre-screener. I think if that is an acceptable way to get, you know, from where we're at today to that vision, then, and it's in our comp plans and that's acceptable, then we can bring it back to MACAC, but I don't think that was we might want to look at it next year if things haven't changed and the policy comes up for review and we're still in the same boat, then maybe we would be looking at language changes. But hoping that, again, it, you know, takes time to build that plane as we're going, then I think we're fine as long as we have that agreement.
Okay. I like it. I think we can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
So my general comment is just, and we talked about this briefly, but as delivery systems, I think we have to go back and do a little bit better communication, particularly on this policy, because as an example, I just had a couple of neighboring counties that were disputing. One county was trying to reject the transfer because they didn't do a full LSCMI, but the pre-screen was completed. They were transferred right after they were sentenced. And so there's, I think, some misunderstanding too about, is the pre-screen what you need to do? Do you have to do a full LSCMI? And just having that overall conversation so that everybody across the state is kind of on the same page about what that pre-screen and or full screen ideology was. Because I think there's some miscommunication across the state about what needs to be done.
Forgive me, but I think that lives in that transfer policy.
It does.
Does it not? I mean, so that really dictates,
Yeah.
and it's pretty clear in there that you're, well,
Yeah.
I say clear and then I'm trying to remember what it says. But
Myself and the one trying to send the transfer believed the same thing. The one trying to reject the transfer because a full LSCMI wasn't done, we believe needed to go back and read the intrastate transfer policy.
so
And that's different than the supervision policy that we did.
Correct.
Supervision risk.
and
policy, which did.
as they come up, we'll try to align them better, certainly. And I think that could change, but I don't know that I'd have the appetite to change the transfer policy yet until we have a vision or come together on the what we're going to do with our risk needs assessment. But I think the transfer policy just says a validated risk assessment.
Yep.
Or pre-screen.
Pre-screen.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pre-screen or risk assessment. And I just think as we're moving forward, this all came like a flurry. Everything was kind of done at the same time and people are trying to absorb that. So I think it would be a good idea wherever we're at to sort of feel that out. And when you hear about things, just kind of go back to the policy and sort of help people understand what the intention of it was. Because as we're sitting at this table, I think we understand the background on the intention, and people that are just getting the policy put in their hand by their director, maybe are missing some of the important like background on why we're doing things and exactly how it's supposed to be done. So it was just a FYI.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's, because this current risk assessment policy we're talking about here, you have to do the LSCMI, right, within a certain period of time, if it's medium or high. And then if that timeline is longer than the intrastate timeline, meaning like, oh, do you see where I'm going? So like, it's within that time frame. You should have done that full LSCMI according to this policy. If you got it transferred quick enough before this policy kind of like hit, then you'd be fine. Otherwise, you're supposed to do that's how some people are interpreting it. So yes, I think that the point is looking at the intrastate policy in conjunction with this when that one comes up for review, just to make sure those timelines and or language doesn't have some sort of like gray area. Right.
Follow up on that. I think when we did the policy on this, I think we did look at the intrastate and try to make sure that those numbers align that 90 days number. So I think we did try to align that piece of the two policies.
60.
Full LCMI within, it was either 60 or 90.
60.
I think that's true. And what happens is, oh, if you have like a huge amount of transfers you're doing and you're not doing them, it's fine if everything is hitting on the exact right timeline, and it's not if it's taking you longer because you have a larger amount to transfer out than you have the staff to transfer. Sometimes so it's a nuance. It's not, I think it's totally fixable. It's a technical thing that just needs a little bit, maybe more finessing in some of the language is all.
And I think where that becomes an issue too sometimes is that, and again, so my county's DWI cases tend to, a large percentage of them are not residents of our county. So a lot of times, especially misdemeanors, but often grosses too, we never see them. So much of our court is still virtual. We never see the person. They're getting sentenced in their house, and we never see them. So to do a full LSCMI and or to get that transfer out immediately can be hard because you're trying to track down a person that doesn't have good contact info, et cetera.
Yeah.
So there's oftentimes where you're at the 90, 120 day mark and you've never been able to contact that person. So that does happen.
But I think the intent of the policy, we'd like take a step back, and the intent of the policy is to find out if they're transferable or not. I mean, that's
correct.
Yeah.
That's a really good discussion, and I appreciate that because I think it raises two things for me. Number one, that we do need to start thinking about these policies in conjunction with each other. And so when we are doing those reviews, like these are great discussions. And we also need to think about just better overall communication as policies are enacted. So I don't have a solution for that today, but I do think that's a good topic that we should think about. How could we put out better communications? Is there like a one pager or something that goes along with the policies as they are enacted, or as revisions are enacted, or something along those lines that might be able to be shared with all agents in the state or something? So I think we should think about that. I'm sort of looking at the EPP folks for that one. But we'll see. Okay. So I'm going to mark that down as like a future topic. Okay. Great discussion. I think we are in a good place to keep the policy in place, but have some flexibility for how it's for the timeline for implementation, depending on the circumstances and getting tools in place. And related to tools, I would like to invite Tessa Nelson from the Risk Assessment Group to the table to just give us a little update, because they have been furiously meeting on the validation, the LSCMI validation. You can come right here. Trying to make room. I'm like totally overtaking this table, but trying to make room for you.
Morning.
Good morning. Oh, here, I'm going to put this by you. There we go.
Do you want to open with questions, or do you want me to just kind of start summarizing what
summary.
we were tasked with? I think maybe starting with the bigger task and then working our way down. So as you're all aware, you saw the presentation from Dr. Hamilton 2 months ago,
It was
I
in
believe.
January, or several months ago.
Well, he came here. I
Yeah.
think that was like 2 months, maybe 3 months ago. The validation study did not come back as well as I think even we thought it would, if that's fair to say, maybe. I think everyone kind of knew the LSCMI had its downfalls, but I think everyone was kind of hopeful of it might be better than it came back. And so with that, at that time, our policy was already kind of put in place, and then we were tasked with going back and kind of having this discussion of, is this what we want to do long term? And if so, if not, if so, and or if not, what's also a short term? So the group has met a couple of times. Dr. Hamilton also came back to our group. We sent him some questions. He answered some questions. We got some clarification on some things. And the group discussed a bunch of different items and kind of landed with, we think the long-term goal, the recommendation is going to be to develop our own homegrown risk needs responsivity tool that can be utilized across Minnesota. The concerns around that, though, are we really felt it was important to have a lot of conversations with people up front, more so like visionary sessions. Like if we could hire somebody to kind of talk through all 3 delivery systems and say, what are your asks? What are your expectations of this tool? What are your wants? What are mandatory? What are things that we should leave out? And kind of have a vision board for an expectation of what this tool would look like. Essentially kind of having an agreement up front, like these are the things that we are wanting this tool to do for Minnesota. This is what our hopes, wishes, and dreams are. And then, so then when it is, and if it is created, that we're all on the same page of understanding what this tool is going to look like and what it's going to do for our population and our staff in agencies and groups. So the request is really, I think at this time, to get an RFP put out for somebody who can kind of navigate those discussions, come in and have those vision boards, help build the vision board. So then whether we have our local resources build a tool, they have a vision board, and then they can put that together. Or if the recommendation from the vision board building is, I think you need to have an outsider build the tool. So hoping for a vision board and recommendation from them on, can your resources build this or not? And if so, great. Cheaper for the state of Minnesota. If not, then we're going to have to ask for more money and get somebody to build a tool. So that's the long-term goal. Before I move on, any questions about that?
Oh, yeah, Molly.
So
Playing musical microphones.
no, I would just say, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think if this is what we end up doing and or building or adopting, it's important that we all have alignment on the values that and the vision, like you said, of what this means, so that we're all using the same thing, that we're together on this, right? I think that's really important. I know MACAC had previously hired somebody to do this work, and I think it is important, not only just our own vision, but like the communities that we represent and what's really important, because you can't get an important tool. So there's trade-offs when you build an assessment tool or an actuarial tool, and you have to make decisions that need to be reflective of the state of Minnesota, not just in this case for MACAC, like what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And so when you think about all of the different dynamics that Dr. Hamilton walked through, around accuracy and inter-rater reliability, easy for me to say, or parity, all these things are just really important, because it's just not going to be perfect. And so but what is better than what we have? And that is the goal, of course, and that we can all use a similar tool. And so I think starting there is really important. So I appreciate that.
Can you say more about what MACAC has done before in hiring someone?
Yes, although it would have, wasn't prepared with all the details. I'm looking over at Cami, if you remember. I don't remember the company that we hired, but we have a whole report, so we can send that PowerPoint. It might be a good starting place too for the risk assessment subcommittee to just look at. That we had kind of walk through all of those different pieces of like risk assessment instruments when we were talking about this. I think it was a while ago, it was a few years back. So I'm not saying that we don't need to do it again, but it might be a good foundational space to just start to see what at least was done then and where we go from there.
What was the purpose of the hiring the person? Was it to understand different risk assessment tools, or was it?
I don't remember I think it had to, I think it had to do with some of this pre-screen. It was before CSAC and before all of this work. So I think it had to do with pre-screener. I think it had to do with all the conversations on, are we going to shift to like a newer fifth generation tool? I remember like with Al Godfrey talking with other, again, kind of like we are now, but Compass and other places at the time, because I think there was this anticipation that, tools grow. Like we're in the fourth generation, we anticipate the fifth generation coming. And so we were in this kind of space anyway, before we got this overall validation study like we have now. So, this is good that we have this. I think it's just informing us what we thought we knew then. But we wanted to know, like, what does MACAC believe in when it comes to risk assessment? So we did some of that work so that we had a better, like, again, that visioning and that understanding of those values. So, yes.
You kind of jogged my memory. I think.
Thank you. I'm glad.
I don't remember anything about the vendor that you hired or that they hired, but I think it was at the same time as around the time of the MinStar C project.
That's right.
If you recall,
it was MinStar C.
And we had a multi-delivery system team. That was, I think Dr. Dewey was maybe leading that effort along with Al and others from the systems. And then that project ended. And I don't, for those who don't recall, I think there was just some not clear alignment on where we were headed with that tool development, if you all may remember that. So that might be another source of some research or background information. Where did we, there might be notes from that project that there's a lot of very spirited conversations around visioning around the tool at that time. And I think that may have been spawning the MACAC kind of follow up, or it may have preceded it, or it was right afterwards, but I think it was around that same time period.
That's right. Nice work, Corey.
Well, I was on the MinStar committee actually at the time, so I remember that.
Yes, that is exactly right.
Thanks.
So either way, it would give us the positives and the don't do's again. Here's what didn't go well, or maybe here's the areas that we could, fine tune and work better on. Versus, okay, that would be, I think that would be good.
I think so too. I think the history is super important. First of all, I think this is very well thought through. I just think I really appreciate the recommendations as we've heard them so far. There's a couple things that maybe I'm going a little too deep in the weeds here, but I'm almost wondering, like, if you're going to send out an RFP, that this person or people would almost need to have both be able to lead a discussion, those skills, right? Be able to do almost like a strategic planning type background, but also have some pretty good knowledge of assessments. So that they can help, if I'm in a group, or hey, I have a question about this. Is this even possible? Well, these tend to this or these tend to that way. And, you don't want to necessarily sway people's opinions, but you could also inform them of, what's possible and not possible. You'd hate to come out of it with a strategic plan is we want the moon, and then you find out later that it's not, that's just not possible. The other thing that I would say is, and just tell me to shut up if I'm wrong here, but we've got some people, maybe a 3 delivery system sort of people who've got experience with this, that maybe we could consider having people, three folks form a committee that could lead these discussions
internally. You're thinking?
Yeah, we could do an RFP and asked for, but we've also put out RFPs and been kind of disappointed and like, you're not really aligning with where we're at. Hopefully that's not the case, but I think that we've got some good people internally that are really good at leading discussions too. So if there's an appetite for that, I wouldn't have a problem with that, as long as they know that their role is not to sway where we're going. It's more over collecting information and having those skills of trying to be as unbiased as possible. Thanks.
And I do think that actually made me think now versus like back when you were having that team meeting, the risk needs responsivity is at a much different place. We are in a much better place statewide than we were 5 years ago. I mean, some agencies were running with needs and responsivity, right? And other agencies were still like holding back on like, I only need to do a risk assessment. I don't need to look at, needs and responsivity. And so maybe you're right. Maybe now those discussions would look much different because the state as a whole is in a much better place to have those combined goals and the way everybody's kind of moving, right? Like, I think that underlines alone, just we're moving forward with a risk needs responsivity tool. That alone, I think, sets the platform in a much better place than maybe 5 years ago. I could be wrong. I definitely was not present in those meetings 5 years ago. Okay.
Let's like see if we want to take action on this one,
Got
and
it.
then unless you
Okay.
think anything else you say would be relevant
Nope.
to that, okay? Because I'm actually thinking, I guess I want to hear tap the pulse of the group. Like, is there interest in potentially doing an RFP for facilitation to help us vision what we want out of a tool, which I think then would give us what we need to write the RFP to actually get it built, right? It's sort of how we did, in some ways, it's how we did the workload study. Like first we needed some information and then we needed, that was a little different, but that's what I was wondering. And I would just say that if we went that route, I would think we'd want to maybe either ask the risk and needs group or establish a small group to develop the RFP and lead it. I can put forth funding for this right now. So funding's not a problem for this type of action. I'll just put that on the table. And then I'm seeing Julie has a notice too. She's saying, will the task force serve as a governance, provide oversight for the RFP and development of the tool, which is, I guess, what I was just getting at, or will that be done with another group entity or undecided? So yeah, we hadn't talked about that, Julie. It's like, how would we go forward if we wanted to do it? So I guess number one, is there interest in potentially doing that? If so, do we want to kick it to the risk and needs group to be the lead on that RFP development, or do we want to have a different group of people do that?
So if I could ask a question
Yes.
before we dive into that. So I remember when we first started CSAC, we were talking about deliverables and prioritization and getting that lined up. We used, and was it the Office or Business of Management through the state?
MAD, yeah.
And
Management Analysis Division.
I mean, they're unbiased. They didn't have they're just they just let us and just I thought they did an excellent job guiding us to get where we needed to be. Could that be an option?
Yeah, it potentially could. I think it doesn't. It's like we also have to consider Carter's point of like facilitation is one thing, but then we also need someone who can understand the what's the word I'm looking, risk R&R, the R&R and the options and something about
Limits.
tools that are out there. Like that it could be someone who doesn't know all that, making sure we have people coming in who are experts to talk to that group, right? To talk to help with visioning. But it could be, if they don't know anything, it might be a challenge.
So if I'm understanding, the one aspect of it could be the risk assessment group creates the scope and like essentially the RFP for something like this that would come back to this group, just like any policy. I'm just kind of stating the obvious.
yeah, we
It would
did
come
that.
here and then we would say, yes, we like this RFP, or no, and go back and forth. And then it still goes to our delivery systems and back before anything would be like published. Right? So I'm just assuming that it's the same process as a policy would be.
It could. It'll take longer
Right.
if we go back to the delivery system, unless you feel like you can make a call here.
I mean, I did find some of the stuff that we worked on and why we hired, I haven't found the final report yet. I know it's out there, but some of we're really looking at like the intersection between risk, race, gender, and fairness, and then what's automated. It needs to, like one thing, for example, that I know came out of it, it needs to be transparent. It can't be a big machine AI like algorithm that nobody even understands how somebody got the risk. Like you need to be able to explain it to your client was an important part of whatever is created as an example, right? So to have somebody facilitate it needs to know all of the expertise on all of developing a risk assessment, or at least what it is, not just like from a practitioner standpoint. So I would think we would want to go back to MACAC and have those discussions since we've done that work. Like, what do we still want in there or not want in there into an RFP? I wanted to make sure I understood what we're committing to in our process perspective, I guess. So I think it's good. I think we would want somebody to facilitate the discussion. So that wouldn't be it's what is it that we're asking this person to do?
Yeah. No, and well, I'm just sort of wondering in terms of timeline, if the risk needs group is the one leading the charge, like could they send it to their groups before it comes here? Like, just to streamline that just slightly.
Revet it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you're going to be putting the RFP out to have those discussions, we have a lot of good discussions in the R&R group, but I think having some input from people in advance who understand research and understand the biases of assessments would be helpful too. So maybe we need to bring in a few people. I mean, Julie isn't here anymore, but somebody like that who really understands, and I'm sure each delivery system has some people that really understand the research and the assessment piece of that. Plus also those of us on the R&R who understand how the line work of doing the assessment happens. Those are two different perspectives that I think have to be there.
Yep.
Prior to sending the RFP.
I think it's all, for me, possibly. I mean, yes, we can do that work beforehand. It would be what if things substantially change and you didn't have a chance then to vet that, I guess. I don't know if that would happen, but we can try.
Yeah, I'm not trying to circumvent feedback. I'm just trying to what's the fastest way to get an RFP out?
Right.
So because there's still then the whole review process and the process itself that has to happen later on. So all we're doing at this stage is what are we asking somebody to do to facilitate a meeting, and what do we expect them to bring to the table? That's all we're asking at this stage. So
Yeah, because as you were talking, Cammie, it made me think if we brought people in and did all those things, I wonder if then in the end we wouldn't even need an RFP for somebody, because we would have done our own internal, back to us doing our own internal. Do we even need an RFP for someone to give us all that information if that's what we're going to go do anyways?
By creating the RFP.
Yeah.
Correct. if we're bringing everybody in to say, you know, we want to say, because we want this to be a part of the topic, are we actually creating more work for us? And really that work could be done. And then we could just take our work and present it as to the tool builder.
As an RFP to
Correct.
get the tool built. I mean,
I don't know.
I would also be fine with that approach.
I don't know how far off we are from each other to even know if that's a reasonable ask.
And that's where my thought was, if we could have that person that we utilize, CSAC utilize, to guide that work group's discussion, to put it in format, to be like, all right, this is what we need, this is what we're looking for, and take that information and then put that out there to build the tool. I guess that's where I was going with that.
So you're saying have that group help the risk needs work group come up with an outline and then bring that to a tool builder to request an RFP for somebody
yes, correct. That's what I was thinking when I was hearing all this.
I feel like this is fast, and I feel like I would want to talk to MACAC, I as a group, and review even the stuff that I just mentioned, since it was so vague in my memory, even like saying what I've said out loud. Like, again, because the things that come to mind are, do we want to, I think that they did focus groups with like incarcerated persons and people on probation. Like, how much do we want to have people who are impacted by this tool's voice and like what matters? And I mean, it's a big thing I just want to make sure that we're, again, getting all of the scope, and again, how much and who we want to like do deeper dives on getting information from, before we're just, here it is, let's go find somebody. I guess that's my internal.
Right. No, but okay. I just want to take a step back, because all we're talking about is what process do we want to use to figure out what we're looking for in a tool. That's the only question in front of us right now. It's not building the tool.
Right.
So the question is like, who do we want to lead that effort? That's question number one. Do we want the risk and needs group to lead that effort? Do we want to create a different group to lead that effort? And do we want, because what you're saying about getting input from incarcerated people could be something that we require the builder of the tool to do. You know, like that could be part of the RFP to build the tool is like must include, we need a proposal for building a tool that does these things with these attributes that includes input from, like those could be aspects of the RFP. But what we're trying to do is just figure out what is our vision for that process. Like what like we need enough information to be able to write that RFP. So we're like at the pre-stage.
Right. And I guess because we did it, we brought people in with lived experience in the visioning. So before we could do that too, I just would want to, this is the first time I'm having this conversation. It feels like we should have it with like our delivery systems, or I should have it with MACAC, since we've done this work. Because I think, when do you want some of those voices? Is it after you're deciding on who's building the tool, or is it before that to say, like, this is what should inform the RFP in the first place? That's what and then that does matter on time and scope and money and what we're writing to. Again,
Okay.
I can't speak for everybody at the moment, is where I'm really stuck, or at least for MACAC at the moment.
Okay, then I guess we can't do anything today.
Well, what we could decide on is sending this back to the R&R work group and coming back with more recommendations for how we proceed. They kind of already have, but we could dial it in a little bit more with some specific questions. And as that goes along, maybe it just becomes more clear.
I mean, I definitely think that if the work group wants to start, like you said, I think you used the word outlining, Tessa, or scoping out kind of what your thoughts are, or the group's thoughts. Makes sense. I don't think that stops that from happening. No, I agree.
So my suggestion is if we could utilize that one group to work with them, and then they could come back to CSAC again with that outline. I think what I'm hearing is that the group just needs somebody to like facilitate to get their thoughts across, kind of like what they did with CSAC. I mean, I thought it was extremely beneficial the way they got us to work, and we were able to accomplish quite a bit with that group. And so that's why I'm just going to keep recommending it. And then Tessa could come back to CSAC, and this is what we came up with. I mean, that group has members from all delivery systems, so it's not like it's just one group working on it. They're made up of quite a bit, right? And so I think that would be beneficial just to get to keep this going. I don't think we want to, it just seems like when we got to go back and forth, I want it to be very beneficial when Tessa comes and presents something, and like, all right, we'll go back and do this, and then come back again, all right, go back and do this, where I think we could skip some of those steps. And then finally, like, once they do come back the next time, then at that time, all right, now we're going to take it back to MACAC, CPO, DOC, to respective organizations, and say, like, this is what the recommendation is, and then we come back to CSAC and take a vote on it. I think that could be feasible. I mean, I think we could probably do, like September, probably, if Tessa come back in August after meeting with those and having recommendations, then we could go, come back to in September to take a vote, would be my hope. But I don't like to hear others.
I mean, I can definitely look into whether MAD can help support the R&R group. I think it usually takes a few months to get them on board. So I just want to be realistic about timing. Like, either way we go, it would be a couple of months before we had somebody. But I can look into that for sure. But I think we follow Kevin's suggestion and send it to R&R for now, and give you request that you start thinking about an outline and pulling together some initial thoughts, and feel free to bring in any other experts that you think would be helpful with that process.
That's what I was actually going to suggest, is if we could get this put on our next R&R meeting and have our 3 delivery systems ask within their delivery system if we have a couple of people that are like have good working in-depth knowledge of assessments, data research, all that business. If they could come as guests maybe to that, as we sort of brainstorm, what might this look like? What are we missing? What do we have to, what are our must-haves, and et cetera. Sort of get that rolling so that we can then bring it back to here's our big picture view of what's going to happen. And then we can kind of get more specifics like that. And maybe that's after that one, maybe that's where we start to bring in the state group and some other things. Then it can go back to delivery systems as a whole by the time we come back to this meeting in either August or September.
So I want to be clear so that I'm understanding. So our group made the recommendation to get an independent contractor to do all of this work, like to start all the conversations with all the delivery systems, build the vision board. This group is now saying, go back and actually do the pre-build, if I would say. Do the pre-build, do the pre-outline to see if we can do the work ourselves. So we're skipping the vision board because the purpose and intent of having the vision sessions with an outside agency was to guide it to work with 3 separate delivery systems in a non-biased way, right? Like somebody who's coming in who doesn't have any stake in any of this can say, okay, these are the things that, what are your wishes, hopes, wishes, and dreams? And then what are the must-haves, right? What do all basic tools need to actually be a validated assessment? And then building the outline from there. And I feel like I want to make sure that I'm understanding, if we bring in people, I am all about that. Like, I think that's a fantastic idea, but I'm wondering if then we even need a vision board after that, or if.
My personal thought process on that was, I think we have the capacity and really smart people in our organizations that we can at least sort of start that process and lay the groundwork, and maybe in the end save ourselves some time and money by having somebody come in and do that and go through all the nitty-gritty stuff and then still miss some of it. If we can do a little bit of that ahead of time with the people that we have, maybe we still do the RFP, but at that point, then it's a little bit more focused, where there's, they're not having to look at 1,000 different things, because we've already kind of narrowed it down to, here's the information we need.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little unclear. So from what you're saying, what would you want them, from what you're saying, what would you want them to come back with? Because when you say an RFP, I'm wondering if you mean an RFP for the original, what they're recommending now, which is an RFP for somebody to come in and do a visioning session, if you will, or do you mean they go back and work on an RFP for a visioning session, see if they come out of it saying, hey, we already have a vision because we've got all these people, we've vetted this so much that is really a point to it. Now we have an idea for an RFP for the actual tool itself.
That is what I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say RFP, it's the RFP for hiring somebody to create a tool.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my thought, but.
And I have a different thought, and this is why I think it's good to, so like I finally found it. We ended up doing this work with this Dr. Russell out of Big Picture Research and Consulting back in 21. And I'll send all of this. This is draft still, so I have to find the final.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an RFP that we put out to get to here, which was on all visioning. So I think maybe that happens. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, that we skip this step, but I think it's important that we pause and really look at, like, what does that, because I think that's a good idea, this visioning. If we can't get the state of Minnesota to understand what are we willing to negotiate, like what, again, there's all these trade-offs that you have, and that's different. So we want to give somebody that's going to build a tool that information. We want to be able to say, like, these are the things the state of Minnesota is willing to do, automated or not automated. Like, how do we want 2 different gender categories, or, what are we going, because something's going to ebb and flow when you make decisions based on that. So that visioning is really important because it's around the values that you give to somebody to build the tool. And so I would think that we're asking the risk assessment group to build out a rough draft of an outline for what an RFP would look like for the consultant to do the visioning that is that unbiased person. In the meantime, we'll talk to our delivery systems. I can get you this information, and maybe at some point, that can all converge. And if we need somebody or not need somebody, we can still be up in the air for discussion. If we feel like we have the answers, maybe that's good enough, and maybe not. I guess we don't know yet.
I don't think we're that far off. I think what I'm suggesting is that they do that, and then as they come back with all this, we'll have more information, or maybe feel more or less comfortable saying what might be, like, on one side of it, like, what's the point to doing this now that we have all this information that's all come together, or boy, we really do need to spend more time visioning. And that's kind of what you're saying, correct?
Correct. And or you might have, because this has been our experience on those, now all this is coming back to me, you might have aspects where people want more weight on having an automated static tool that you can click a button, and others might say, absolutely not, that's not okay with me, I don't want anything to do with AI. I'm over exaggerating an example, but you could have that. And then where do we land on that? And that's why we might need an outside consultant to help us, like, balance some of that out. You know what I mean? So the thing is, we don't know yet because we haven't had this kind of conversation, but I think this is such a big deal for the state of Minnesota to get on board with. We need to make sure we're engaging as many stakeholders, and outside of even community corrections, judges, people, like, I don't know who we need to, like, engage with this, but we need to make sure that at the end of the day, we have buy-in to use this tool that we create, and that we don't, like, not get on board from that visionary standpoint to begin with.
agree.
And I think ultimately just the discussion needs to start, and that specific discussion about this needs to start. It starts with R&N and R&R, and we bring in a few of our own more experts to start the discussion. Bring it back here, see where we're at.
Do you want to see me in September for that? I just want to make sure. So we'll go bring it back to our group in August. I'll reach out to the tri-chairs, schedule something. So they bring anybody they feel would be of value to bring to that talking. Okay. In August, and then I'll come back here in September.
I just wanted to add to just kind of follow up with Molly. I think, and you alluded to it too, Tessa, the facilitation of that conversation is so critical though. I think everybody's agreeing with that. Kevin mentioned it. I think you did too, Carter. I think making sure that everyone has a voice, everybody's opinions are valued, that there aren't preconceived expectations going into the process. And I think maybe that's kind of what you guys are kind of grappling with. Like, how do we manage that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
We're all peers, we're all colleagues. Like, do we need an outside independent voice to sort of help steer us or to pull us in or to empower people? I don't know. So we might be back here later in September, you saying, yeah, we still need some help, or you might have some really great scope and we might be ready to roll. But you guys are gonna have to figure out who's gonna lead this effort. If you've got the three tri-chairs, are they the right people, to lead that conversation? I don't know, just throwing that out there. I've been through a lot of these sort of collaborative efforts, and it's really vital that you have kind of clear leadership and clear expectations and those kind of things to make sure everybody's. It's a real collaborative effort, I guess is my point. So.
That's what I come back to, and I don't know that it's fair to put any of the stress on the Risk and Needs Committee, to be honest. I mean, maybe like the three chairs just need to write this thing, I mean, I think we need a facilitator. That's what I think. I think we need a facilitator. We need to I can't hire the only facilitator I can hire without doing an RFP is MAD. MAD may not be the right group because they don't have the expertise in R&R.
Mhm.
And so maybe as the 17th alternative today that we consider, maybe the chairs look at drafting a potential RFP for a facilitator for this purpose.
I agree. I think we've been pretty unclear with Tessa.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fair that we say that you come back with recommendations when she just gave us recommendations. And I think the most comfortable that we'd all feel is if we had a facilitator.
Becca.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just wondering if the person who's best to facilitate a conversation about what the tool should look like and involve and the stakeholders involved is just the person that we would hire to build the tool, right? Like, isn't that just the RFP? Is we put out an RFP, we want to make a tool, and then this expert comes in who's an expert in making a risk assessment tool, and then they talk us through what's the vision, who do you need to be involved, and that's all part of the whole process. And we just start working with them from the start instead of a totally different independent outsider facilitates a visioning, and it just extends the process by months and months. But that's just my thought.
I mean, it could be part of the RFP that's where we have to start with the build, right? That there has to be a visioning session, that we need input from various stakeholders, including individuals who are in the system now or have been in the system. It's a good point. Like, we could build this into the build, into the RFP for the build too.
Or you could, in the RFP, I suppose, have two projects that you could bid on, both.
That's true.
Because the thing I think about, again, I'm not an expert on knowing all the people out there that can do this, but are there people that are more experts at, again, building AI versus building like a, you know, a tool that's more about the interview and the conversation versus somebody that, I mean, I don't know whose expertise or what. I don't know if you have people that are more, that have some bias because they've already created tools and that's just what they believe in their values. Like, so I don't know. I literally don't know because we have never done that ask, but we could do it that way so that if people, just an idea again, or it's separate, I don't know, but.
That is true. Because we could do it like, I just have been on a task force where we hired 3 different researchers for different expertises to get us the information that we needed, you know, all with, and, you know, starting with like, this is what we need. And then we needed 3 different people to do it. Yeah, that's possible. I've written RFPs like that before, 1 or more. That's possible.
The question becomes if the answers to the visionary conversation obviously need to happen to like be able to have, this is what we want the tool then to do. It might preclude or include people to bid in, right? Like, I know I don't want to do a tool like that, or yes, that's exactly what I'm designed to do. So, I mean, sorry, I said that. And then I'm like thinking it would still have to be kind of part 1, part 2.
Or they could partner with another organization
Correct.
that they know does
Yep.
more stakeholder input stuff.
Mhm.
You know, like I've seen researchers do that.
Yeah.
Does that leave us? Are we moving towards
I
writing an
don't think we're
RFP
getting
for
out
the?
of this room today, actually.
I'll leave it to you guys. I'm obviously not an expert in any of this. I was just thinking like some pre-conversations, I was just thinking might help us focus a little bit better and, you know, contrary to the other comment, it might actually help us save some time as we get ready to do the RFPs, 1 or 2 of the RFPs.
I think we could do both. I think we could even internally have those discussions while the RFPs are out there and while that's happening. And then by the time they come to meet with us, we can say, these are the pre-discussions we've had. Now you get to come in and then lead even further discussions, right? Like you get to go out and then meet with the stakeholders and meet with other, you know, those with lived experiences and meet with everybody else. They get to then take that work and then really do the underground layer work of what we give them. And then hopefully take all that information and then build a tool for them. I also live in Ideal Island, so I am not naive to that. I know there's a lot of stops along the way. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. I think I hear that we are going to try to draft the RFP for the whole shebang, which can be reviewed by the delivery systems before we send it out. Absolutely. So I don't want to cut that out at all. But maybe, I guess the question would be, I think the chair should be involved. Is there anybody else who would be involved in that process? CSAC. And I guess I skipped a step. Is CSAC good with building a new tool for the state? Like, is everybody on board with that idea?
Yes.
Okay. Any objections to that?
So when we say new tool, are we including a pre-screener with that, or would that be part of it, or are we just looking as just replacement for the LSCMI? Just to be clear.
It's a good question, but I think that if it's an automated tool, you don't need a pre-screener. That's my understanding, but I think that would all have to be decided. I think that's part of the
That'll
discussion.
be part of what'll be, that'll be part of the visioning, and it will be in the, like, I think we'll have to put some of that in the RFP, like, because we had talked about, we heard from Dr. Hamilton that all these pre-screeners that we're using could actually be built into the tool itself. So that's, I think, the ideal state is it achievable? We'll find out.
And thank you, Julie, she said, count me in on that, which I think having your lens is really critical for sure, you know, that expertise. Cause I even thought about like, just even when you do the focus, you know, questions to people with lived experience, like how you ask questions matters and, you know, like all the things that I know I'm not an evaluator, but matter. I know enough to be dangerous. So that's great. Thank you.
I have a question about your question. Are you talking about people that are in this room
Yeah,
volunteering, or are we talking?
CSAC folks. I think we just let's leave it up here. Let's do it.
I would like to be involved.
Because then we'll send it back to the delivery systems. Once we draft something, we'll send it back. We'll look at it here. We'll send it back to the delivery systems to review, and then we can send it off once we're all happy with it. So you want to be on it? Okay.
Becca, thank you, Becca. Corey, yeah, you have a lot of history. That's great.
Chairs and Julie. So I have Carter. So in addition to the 3 chairs, I have Carter, Becca, and Julie. And Corey. Thank you. I knew I was missing one. Okay. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right, that will be our plan. You're off the hook for now. Okay. But you may, you didn't finish your update. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
And
please?
actually, I think the next one hopefully is not larger discussion.
Okay.
And maybe we just say, I don't know, table it for today. I don't know. That was the long-term goal. So long-term goal is we're going to build a new tool. Short-term goal is what do we do in the meantime? Because we have a policy that went into effect July 1st that says we are all going to be doing using the LSCMI. So the group recommended that the goal is to implement the recalibrated cut points statewide by July 1st of 2027. If you remember when Dr. Hamilton came and presented, he presented some suggestions for a recalibrated cut points to help with creating the bell curve and shifting the population into more creating the bell curve of where you have so many in the low, so many in the mediums, and then so many in the high. I'm just trying to refresh your memory of his presentation of why the recalibrated cut points came into play. To help everyone adjust, we also recommended that 90 days after the pre-screen tool is ready and available, that the intrastate policy would move to, I shouldn't say policy because we're not talking about that, but that we agreed statewide that intrastate would move to the recalibrated cut points. Now, the tool, the pre-screen tool, as it just got brought up, is maybe, I don't know, even know if we do it. All of these things up in the air about the pre-screen. But the discussion was around how do we get the states starting to move towards being in alignment and on the same page and standard supervision, which was the goal of CSAC from the beginning. How do we start to get the state ready for that and on the same page? So now as I'm talking, I don't know what you want to do about this pre-screen recommendation, which is that we start 90 days after, and agencies who want to start moving to the recalibrated cut points can. That was our recommendation.
I think to make sure I'm understanding 3 levels. So the formal recommendation is to use the recalibrated cut points only on intrastate.
No, it is to, anybody can start to use the recalibrated cut points now. Sure. Then a must after the pre-screen is available and ready, 90 days after that is ready for intrastates, and a must by July 1st of 2027. So a year. Everybody gets a year to start working towards moving to the recalibrated cut points. The thought process behind that was eventually likely, again, these are all hypotheses, but somewhat backed by Dr. Hamilton's research, as he shared, likely these shifts are going to happen statewide. You're going to see some of these numbers moving, even with a new tool, even with, even if we, well, we're not talking about buying Compass, but if we bought a already built tool, right? You would see some of these shifts. And so how is the state going to start getting ready for these shifts while we build the tool long-term and short-term? And so our recommendation was a year from, well, a little less than a year, to start agencies kind of moving towards that.
And then my next question is, so then in that year, we're saying then that because the supervision standards are also working on a policy, can you shift your supervision level internally? Or is the expectation that the supervision level will follow the risk level July 1st, 2027 for all applicable clients?
I think that would have to fall with that policy.
Okay. Then I would say I definitely know that one of the requests I know that MACAC is making, and Dr. Hamilton said he was willing to provide, is that we get our own jurisdictions data. I think it's too early to be able to make any sort of recommendation or support for cut points until we can really look internally at some of the things that I know a lot of spaces have questions about. And so, so I would just respectfully ask, like, let's figure out how to, at least for MACAC, I know Matt Cook has it on his radar to do that ask, so that we can do some internal stuff first and then come full circle back to the conversation. It may still fall in this area, but I know that the request was made, and so I would want to give space and time for jurisdictions to look at that.
On its face, I don't have a problem with this. I think the question is it's helpful when you say that Dr. Hamilton suggests that no matter what we do, we're going to be moving in this direction. So my thought my initial thought was, if we are going to create a new tool, why would we move and then move again? But if the movement is going to be towards the same, it's fine with me. And I'm not pushing back on you, but I'm just wondering what you mean by internal stuff, like internal data. What can you say more? Like what is it that you would be?
So, and he described that it would be not easy, but I think like relatively. So Scott County, I would want to know the data set, the raw data set that was used for Scott County for this analysis, provided to me, and then like Aiken County would be to her, et cetera. The big question is that discussion around risk tolerance related to categories and recidivism related to those categories. It's different when you isolate to Hennepin, to Scott, to Aiken than when you put everybody into one bucket to Minnesota. And I think people really want to be able to have discussions locally around risk tolerance and whether to support, recalibrated cut scores, depending on what that means for your particular jurisdiction, because it might look different. And I think that, and that's just one of the reasons that was requested. And so in order, again, we want everybody to be able to support whatever decisions are made. And I know that was a request again from the MACAC board. And so we're waiting for that data at this time. So we just want to be able to look at that before moving forward.
Okay. Well, I mean, the counties are likely going to look slightly different, right? I mean, especially in different parts of the state. So I'm just wondering what the end game is, but okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's one we have to sit with for a little bit.
Okay.
So we'll let those conversations play out.
I just had a comment on that too, that I think a couple months ago we had this conversation, and I'm a little leery of in a year we switch all across the board, particularly since we're looking at a new tool. And I think, you know, when you talked about doing it through intrastate, I think that makes a lot of sense to like to try it out, to kind of pilot it to see what that looks like and how that turns out after a year trying it. So I'm on board with trying it with intrastate and then be able to get some information about what that does look like. I'm not sure. I'm a little bit leery still of saying in 1 year, we do it across the board and then we'll bring in a new tool.
So is the ask for CSAC right now to go back to our organizations to get feedback and then bring it back? Or are we looking for what are we looking for right now? If that is that your final recommendation to CSAC, and is that something that then you want us to bring back to our groups to have those conversations?
I think it should go back to the delivery systems to have those conversations. Like this is the recommendation from your group, right?
Yes.
So I think it should go back to those organizations and we should put it back on the agenda.
And they should have, I mean, this was emailed out to everybody on the risk needs work group right after we met, and then was also sent to all the tri-chairs to send out to delivery systems. So it should possibly be a fairly fast. And again, this work group, the risk needs work group, we've had these recalibrated cutoff scores since January. We've had these for 6 months. And have had kind of, you know, continued discussion about how it'll affect agencies and kind of the work that, how does it go into policy? Then it shifted to, the discussion shifted to, do we do a new tool or not? And then, so that's kind of where the birth of the short-term goal is. It was a difficult one. I'll just say that, because of, we needed to know, is the long-term goal of a new tool actually going to happen? And if that's 2 to 5 years, then we definitely need a short-term goal, right? But if it's, I mean, 6 months to 2 years, yeah, I think everyone could get by with not being on the same page and kind of all over the board. So that's where the hard part is we needed to know where we were going long-term and what long-term looks like, to then decide, you know, because right now, even if you think about it, getting RFPs and then vision boards to even getting a tool, I mean, we're talking probably 3 years before we're implementing a tool realistically. And so then that shifts the importance of the weight of what we do short-term.
That is all, that's really good. I'm glad that you laid it out that way, because I think that today we set a really important direction that does like change something, right? So we are going to work on an RFP for a new tool. So now we know we're in that like probably 4 to 5 year time frame for the longer term change.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives us a little bit of a different perspective on how, like, short term, and that short term is a long term. But within that short term, I think I think you've given some good information for the delivery systems to like officially go back and discuss now, which is, should we move to those cut points in the interim? That's the question I hear you saying. And I hear the recommendation being that we should. And you're giving a recommendation for when. So the delivery systems can talk about that. The other piece of that is that we did have this pre-screener in play, like in development. I think we have to talk about whether we want to continue that or not. Or do we want to put all of our energy into the longer term tool? And those two things together are really what are going to get us to the short-term solution, right?
Yes.
And I think we're spent on risk assessment today, so it's not something that we can decide today. But I do think those are things that each of the delivery systems can talk about between now and the next time we bring this up on the agenda. So let's commit to bringing this back, the short-term solution, back to a future agenda here. I'll consult with the chairs to determine timing, if that's an August or September discussion, depending on when they can have discussions. And then we'll put it on the appropriate agenda based on that.
Would you also like the LSCMI to be used as supervised releases to be discussed at a different time? I'm assuming that's
you guys came back with a lot.
Yes, we did.
Let's talk about that in August. How's
Okay.
that? Yeah.
You want me to come back in August for that?
For that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I can do that.
Is the recommendation for that clear enough where the delivery systems can go back with that as well?
Oh, what is it? I guess I don't
It
know.
was in there.
I know it's in there, but like I don't remember.
If they're receiving risk needs responsivity release plans from the facilities, we would utilize those plans until a reassessment date is required for an LSCMI. So yes, we would use the LSCMI for supervision, not the MinStar. Was the recommendation.
Without discussing it further, I
Okay.
don't know.
Yep.
That it would be.
Let's talk about it in August.
Okay.
Let's talk about that in August. Okay. And I appreciate
Okay,
that
thank you.
Thank you.
we're pushing you off, but
Yes.
thank you so
No,
much.
that's fine.
It's been a great discussion today.
So I think we need a break.
Yes, I did too.
So I have 11:06. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and do the workload study update. For that, and just checking in with Don, did we elevate Sarah and Andrea? Okay. So we will move into the workload study update. Lots of meetings and analysis and some really exciting stuff in the works. And so we do have an update from Evident Change. And as soon as they're elevated, I will. All right. Thank you. I don't know which one of you are going to take the lead here, but thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. Can you all? Oh, Andrea, you're there. I was not expecting to see everyone. I thought you had a conflict. Anyway, good to see you all. Sarah Covington, with an analyst with Evident Change. For those of you who have not met me or seen me before, just want to give a quick update on the workload study. And with that, I'm going to share my screen, a couple slides. All right, can you all see that? Okay. Oops. We've presented this slide a number of times before in our past updates with CSAC, but just want to kind of do some, refresher of where we're at in the overall process. We've just wrapped up data collection earlier this month, and the analysis from the study is underway. Since we last met, when we gave our last update in April, I think we just finished training. It was just, I think, ended maybe a day or two before the CSAC meeting. So really the focus in the past couple of months has been on supporting the data collection. Data collection was about a 2-month period. Agents and officers were just, as a summary, we're collecting time on, or tracking time on a sample of their cases over those 2 months. In addition to that, they're also looking at, tracking time on things that were activities are outside of their assigned casework. So, meetings and trainings and things like that to understand, so we can really understand how much time do agents have available for the work that's assigned to them. So there's another area of work that they were recording time on. As I mentioned, the data collection is complete, and then supervisors also played a role in the study as well, in periodic reviews. Kind of a couple of primary purposes for that was just to ensure that people were actually engaged in the study and collecting time along the way, but also to review the data collected, and also with the understanding of the work that was realistically done on those sampled cases, to, you know, flag or indicate to us if there's anything that they were concerned about that should be, you know, maybe excluded from the study, so that we're not, you know, we can understand realistically how much time does it take to do various work assigned, you know, different types of supervision or just different types of investigations. So, you know, we ask that supervisors kind of take a look and indicate whether or not the work was actually done. Maybe, you know, something happened, for instance, if a PSI couldn't be completed because the person couldn't be located, or, you know, just anything that was, you know, that might be like, this isn't quite a good example of the work, you know, the time needed to do this. But again, also, you know, a review of the data, you know, as well as just say if there's perhaps maybe the agent did everything perfectly, but just, you know, didn't have the capacity to participate in the study. So, you know, the data aren't really reflective of the work done. So that was the review process. So all of that, again, wrapped up, and an analysis is, as I said, is underway. While that's been going on, we've also been having discussions with the workload study leadership team, you know, some of you looking at right now, really taking a look into the funding formula. So examining, taking kind of dissecting the formula, looking at its various components and seeing, you know, what's working, what's problematic with those components. So, you know, specifically looking at the base, you know, looking at the population count, capitated rate, and kind of pulling it apart and trying to understand what's working, what's not working. A lot of those conversations have been, I think, directed around the population counts, the client population counts. The funding formula is pretty heavily weighted in the client population. And so examining, you know, are there opportunities to count populations or count clients in a way that's maybe a little bit more stable? Because currently it's a point in time. So is there something, you know, we can look at maybe multi-year estimates or things like that? And also are there opportunities to not penalize or financially penalize, you know, agencies for early discharge in that count? So that's really been kind of a big focus of our conversation recently, is, you know, what are different, you know, forecasting different ways to kind of count the population and how that might look. We've also been looking at, again, like I said, the you know, at the capitated rate. Part of that capitated rate is the administrative rate. So we've developed a update to get some information on what are the administrative costs. So that survey has been designed and has been distributed to all agencies. You know, things like what are the kind of the cost of keeping lights on, what are the costs of, you know, what is in addition to direct services, you know, which the workload study will inform, like in addition to like the cost of just how many agents are needed to do this work, what's the cost to support supervision? So that's live and active right now. Andrea, do you have any thing you want to add about that or any of these?
No, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Nothing there.
So just a couple little data points, exciting things. So we have over 46,000 weekly data submissions from the study. Very, very impressive effort. The way it worked was that agents, you know, like, as I mentioned, were tracking time on sample their cases for about 2 months, but each week as they recorded time, you know, we had scratch sheets that made it sort of accessible and convenient to record, jot down time, but each week they were asked to put, you know, take anything that they'd documented and enter it into Smartsheet for, so we'd had, you know, the information electronically for analysis. So we amassed over 46,000 weekly data submissions across the state. There were 555 agents or officers and 116 supervisors that were involved in the review, representing 24 CCA agencies, 4 CPO agencies, and 11 DOC districts. And for this presentation, I was going to put together a map, you know, showing all where there was county representation in the study, and realized it kind of got a little bit more like, felt a little almost like degrading to show who didn't participate, because it was pretty broad representation. So that's pretty exciting to see. So only 14 counties had no representation in the study. In terms of the number of sampled clients, so these are counts at the client level, we had over 3,000 adult probation clients sampled for the study, 629 supervised release, over 550 juvenile probation clients, and a handful of juvenile supervised release. And these, not all of these are going to be, this is very preliminary, not all of these are going to be included in the sample, because supervisors might say, that's not a good case to include, or, whatever the reason there might be. We're still in the early stages of analysis. There might be duplicates or something like that, where maybe an agent accidentally created two forms, things like that. So it will diminish slightly as we, determine who the ultimate population is that will inform the time estimates. But and then for the investigations, we also tracked, so these were start to finish. It was, the time it takes to complete a bail study or to complete a cert study from assignment to completion. So we had 337 bail studies, 12 cert studies, 8 community investigation or life sentence reports. We did extend the sampling period a bit to try to pick up some more of those, especially the cert studies and the community investigation reports. We knew that we would have a small sample going into it, but just and we were able to pick up a few more. 59 PDIs, 860 thereabouts PSIs, 120 release investigations, 112 sentencing worksheets, and lastly, 100, almost 200 transfer investigations. And then, like I said, on top of this, which is not really, there's nothing to really indicate here, but we'll have agent estimates for the time they spent on average on other types of work that are outside of their assigned caseloads or investigations. So we'll have, that we don't really have a visual to show, but an estimate from the number of agents that track time, showing that this is on average, like basically what their time available is, average time available is for their caseloads. So we're going to keep plugging away at the analysis over the next month or two, and continue our discussions regarding the funding formula updates. Determine, once we get the survey results that are out right now with agencies, what are the updates we should consider to the administrative costs, and finalize the updates to the formula. I just threw this in here last minute because I don't feel like I can state this enough. Andrea and I have had just an wonderful experience working with people across the state, and I just think that people were just want to say accolades to the work that was done. It was not, I think it was more time than we had anticipated, unfortunately, for people. People were incredibly patient with the process. I know, I'm sure it was frustrating. At all of these studies, we've done a number of these studies. It is not fun work. No one wants to, they're timesheets that are, on steroids. It is not an easy process to do. I don't really wish it on anyone, but it is very important. And people were wonderful to work with. And I will say, I think that the quality of data that we're seeing, and kind of the clear dedication to data collection, despite the fact this is a pretty annoying process, was really impressive. And so I just want to say that shout out to agents and the supervisors for their participation in this. We were really quite impressed with the diligence and the dedication to the study. Also, sort of a shout out to Danelle and Alicia at DOC, who were very helpful in administering and monitoring the smart sheet. So that was, just want to put that out there for that support. Yeah, and I think, no, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Sarah, for the update. Appreciate that. I will open it up for any questions or comments for evident change. Kelly.
Thanks,
Excuse me.
Sarah. I really appreciate the update. Since I'm not one of the members of the work group, I also I don't always know like the inner workings of all of your discussions. And so if I ask you questions that you've talked about ad nauseum, please forgive me. But like the first question I have is because you were talking about working on the funding formula, and you know, one of the difficulties that I think we have is that the statute includes a capitated rate that was derived from multiple factors. One of those being the average cost of a probation officer, like what's the average salary of a probation officer? And like we know that, like CSAC got a very detailed presentation at the beginning of our work together. And so we know what went into it because we had the team that helped develop that number here to talk about what went into that. But the legislature doesn't remember that anymore. And so I was just wondering, like, if you're also collecting data and information on some of those factors that are under the hood, so to speak, so that if there is a need to recommend a change to those, we have the data to support that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something that in all of these studies that we do, ultimately, at the end of the day, this information gets used to justify requests to people who don't do the work. You know, the legislators who are, appropriations committees or whatever, but they're not necessarily that familiar with, agents, community corrections practice. And so I think, certainly having something that is transparent and justifiable and defensible is really important. And so that's some of the things that we've been guiding our discussions along the way of like what, data informed, of course, too. So, I mean, what is the time, how much time does it take based on, so there's various elements, of course. So how much time does it take to do the work, or how much cost essentially is needed per client, on a sort of per client basis. So we could kind of look at sort of the direct cost of or the cost of direct services. But then, pulling out into this, what are the additional supports, the administrative supports, because as part of the capitated rate, there's kind of a supervision component and a admin component. So, how much does it really cost to run an agency, to support the staff? And obviously that's going to vary on a number of things. I mean, but predominantly, the size of the agency. So we're collecting information right now, so we can have update, you understand a more current understanding what the administrative costs are for that. But again, have that data inform that component of the formula. What else? I think.
And I would just emphasize, I don't think the cost of the agent was in the admin costs. I think that was in the supervision costs side.
It is,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So like,
and so there's,
that's the worst, like that's the worst hidden factor there is that, we all know that salaries change as contracts are negotiated. And because it's hard coded into a number that's in the statute that we can't change unless we ask for a change to that. Like, so, I guess I was always envisioning that there might be a recommendation to break apart that number in some way or pull some things out of it and have them go separately. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but like, I hope you guys are talking at that level too. That's all I would say is I hope you're talking at that level as well.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
So that's my first one. And then my second one is like I just think about it. Sorry, I'm just using this as a forum to get all of my thoughts out because this is making me think about it again. But I understand, like the workload side of it is really like, tell me if I'm wrong or help me understand this. So like the understanding the time study gets us to like how many agents do we need to supervise the population that we have? So there is like this interrelated connectiveness between time and population. And that's where, to me, the early discharge comes in. And so I'm not sure if you've been, I think our expectation was that you'd collect information on early discharge practices because we were aware that there are differences across the state in some areas using it more than others. And then that affects the population. You know, so a county that has a robust early discharge process might actually be touching more cases, but they're working with those individuals to move them along once they've done what they need to do. Whereas another county might choose not to. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. I 100% understand that, but as to why a county might choose not to do early discharge. But if another county chooses not to, then their population will look bigger, even though they might overall touch fewer cases. Like if you think there's like the stat, and it's one of the downfalls of our probation survey being a point in time on a day count, when there is also a flow, you know, to be accounted for throughout the year, that that also it goes to capacity of the agency. So I just wanted to air that. I'm hoping that you're looking at that as well, and that's another area that you'll be able to talk to us more about when you start coming back with recommendations.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because it has been a focus on and that is, I think, heavily, like as you mentioned, like represented in that population count is, so how do we, having a population count is obviously a good thing, because I think, for getting back to your question, to understanding what are the components that go into the formula, it's pretty hard to dispute that as legislators. Like, yes, here's our demand for services, and then this is some component of the funding formula is tied to that demand. So it's not like we're going to abandon that completely, but how do we count populations that's not going to penalize agencies that are doing early discharge or disincentivize that. And also, one other thing too is that we've been talking about is that there is a with that point in time count, it's a pretty turbulent estimate when this is funding something that is a 2-year, it's done biannually. Like, this is, maybe we need to be looking at something that's a little bit more stable across time to kind of give to ensure that agencies can sort of appropriately plan or be funded to meet the needs of their clients, over time. And so we've been exploring different options of like what changes maybe doing to put into place, and forecasting different ways of, like, if we did, took a look at supervision, we've looked at things like average daily population counts as opposed to at one point in time, or open supervision any point in time during the year, or just different, how do these different ways of counting the demand impact, and what might be appropriate to consider or use moving forward.
Thanks. And I appreciate that it's a really difficult job that we're asking you to do everything all at once, everywhere. Is that the name of the movie? Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I appreciate it. It's a really hard job. I would just the last point I wanted to make on early discharge is, like, that was one thing that the legislature specifically called out in our deliverables. And so it's one where they wouldn't have said it if they didn't think that it was important as a practice. We have not tackled as a committee, like, whether there should be a more uniform practice there. Maybe that's in our future, maybe it's not, but the legislature wouldn't have put it on our list if they didn't think that was important, because it can be a really powerful incentive for somebody to engage in supervision. So, we do need attention to that factor. Oh, I had a whole other thought in my head and I lost it, so I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you for those.
How about others?
I just I just want to say how much I appreciate you taking the time and meeting with the agents and supervisors going through this process. I think those sessions were extremely beneficial and helpful and providing that time. So I want to say a big thank you for you guys for doing that. One question I do have, and I forget the answer to it, is are caseload sizes, are recommendations going to be made on caseload sizes? So if you have high risk population, the max recommendation is X, Y, and Z. Is that being looked at or other areas?
Yeah, that's one thing that is, will be something the study can address, is saying like, okay, this is how much time it takes on average for a high risk case. Well, then we also need to consider, how much time do agents have available after considering their leave time, and then of course meetings and things like that. So, and with those two kind of pieces of information, we can determine what a high risk caseload should be, or if it's whatever type of supervision. And even looking at it as sort of a generalist, if you want to say like, all right, well, we think that not every agency has can have specialized caseloads like that, and so we could look at kind of an overall average of based on the distribution of supervision or whatever. But yeah, there's absolutely.
And is that going to differentiate between offense level? So it doesn't matter if it's a felony high risk or a medium high risk, that a high risk is a high risk?
We could look at that, and we did collect. We asked quite a few client based characteristics on the data collection. So what is just given that supervision looks quite different across the state, and so how do we kind of standardize it? So we asked highest offense, contact standards, risk level, supervision level, offense, specialized supervision type, if there was a sex offender supervision or DWI supervision, or some so we could certainly mix and match. We have the information needed to kind of look at how the time varies by those components or factors.
All right. Well, thank you both very much for the update. Look forward to hearing more information as we move along. So I will turn it over to the next agenda item.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so I said I would bring a document to this next meeting to talk about sort of sequencing. And if you'll bear with me, I'm actually going to try to hit on it and go through it, like not in total detail, but in some detail, so we can talk about a few things. Let me just get it open and start sharing. Hang on one sec. Okay. Okay, so I just want to say that I did not start this format. This was I continued a format that somebody else started. So if you hate it, don't blame me. But I know it's really hard to read, but I'll do my best to talk you through it. But basically, if ever, just to ground everyone, if we go back to the statute that created CSAC, there were 11 things in that statute that we were tasked with working on to bring policy uniformity, all that stuff to community supervision across the state. So last time we talked through the pieces that are done and moved them off to a different spreadsheet. This time, this document is really only showing you the things that are still in play. There's a couple things on here that are done just to show you that we did something. But this is mostly showing the things that are still in play, and sort of what I'm trying to help us become have awareness of is some of the interdependencies that exist between the different processes, and as I went through it, the places where I realized, oh, we have a task that we haven't even started doing. So we'll talk about those too. All right, so the first one, the first deliverable for the state, and I put the statutory language in the second column so that if you ever want to remember what we were tasked with doing in the statute, you can look at that. And where there's a word, like in this first one, the word develop is in brackets. That's because, like, to make a sentence that made sense, I just put a little word there because it was really the statute is written like CSAC shall develop recommendations for, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's why I added a couple words to make it make sense. All right, so the first one is development of statewide supervision standards and the definitions to be used across the state. So what we have done, what we've focused on is adult supervision standards so far. That's what we've been doing so far. The ISR policy was our first adult supervision standard. It was already in play before CSAC was formed, but we took it under the umbrella of our work so that we could, number one, test our process, learn our process, and number two, make sure everybody was aware of what was going on. The second policy in development, this yellowish one, is the IPV policy, so the intimate partner violence policy. And that one's been under development for a bit longer. There's been a lot to work through there, but our goal is to get that back to us next month so that, because the delivery system should be talking about it now. And our goal is to have it come back in August. And then if that happens, then we could schedule it onto sooner. If we approve it, we could get it scheduled onto an exec council meeting for DOC so that we can get that policy approved and we can establish an effective date for it. So when we talk about it next month, we should start thinking, because we always forget this part, what's a good effective date? we should be thinking about that. All right, so that's that policy. And then I didn't put, it's not up here, but the case planning policy, the risk assessment policy, the training policy are also part of adult supervision standards. So that's happening under another deliverable. But we came to realize that once you put all those things in place, there's like just a few things left that fall in that supervision standards bucket. So that's what the JRI2 group is working on right now, is like, let's pull all of the rest of that into a single policy so that we can set the rest of the standards for adults. So I put on here, I'm just sort of guessing it might take them till the end of the year to get to policy form with that. They've been working on those things and they've come here for some feedback. They're still working on it a little bit. So I think it'll take a little bit more back and forth before we have that in a good policy form. So this is all a guess. All the rest of this timeline is guess. But my guess would be maybe we could have a policy we can vote on by the end of the year. Then it could be sent through exec council early next year. And again, we'd have to think about an effective date. And then lastly, in this zone is we have there was a specific question back from the commissioner to say, provide additional recommendations for supervision standards for misdemeanors that are not screened with the LSCMI, because by then commissioner knew we were going in that direction with the risk assessment policy. And that has been folded into the work of the remaining supervision standards. So that's why this little dotted line and the arrow shoving it up into that category. So assuming we get all of that done by the end of the year, then we could start working on juvenile supervision. So I just threw that into January of 2027 as a potential starting date. But basically, that's the interdependency. We're working on adults. We need to finish adults, and then we'll be able to work on juvenile. So that's why it's just sequenced out later. And you guys can stop me anytime if you have questions. Okay. Deliverable 2 was the risk and needs assessment tool. So requiring us to use the same agreed on risk screener and risk needs assessment tools as our main. So basically trying to get us all to the same, similar tools, similar cut points, all that fun stuff. So we have had, the first thing we did was adopt the LSCMI. And once we did that, then the next steps were to work to do the validation of that tool and to develop a policy for use of risk assessment in general. So that's this like second big bar kind of splitting off into two areas. At the same time, since we knew there was a specific, question in the statute about pre-screeners. So we thought we would explore the development. We did a little survey of like, where are we with pre-screeners? Realized we're all over the board. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Could we get to one? Could we get to yes on one? So we had a group going to explore the development of a pre-screener. And that's why we have this space where it's possible that we could keep doing that development and maybe put one in play, or we are at this decisional point of maybe we just stop that and work on a full tool that will do it all. All right, so coming off of the LSCMI validation, we're in the space of trying to develop a response to the recommendations. And once we figure those things out, then the next steps are implementation. So we thought we came up with one of those ideas today. So I could add an RFP in here. But in the meantime, we did finish the policy, the general policy. And then I just note on here that whatever tool we have, it has to be revalidated every 5 years. That's in the law and it's in our policy. So those are the dependencies. The one piece that's still sort of hanging out here, Commissioner gave us back recommendation to study and make recommendations for formal integration of MnSTAR 3.0 for supervised release or ISR. So people that leave prison have a risk assessment score that is based on our internal tool. How does that integrate with the supervision of those individuals? That's actually that last topic I think that that Tessa was bringing up, and it was like a bridge too far to talk about it today. But that is also a deliverable that we should be trying to get solved. So again, I'm guessing that maybe we could figure that out by fall. All right, so that's all the risk bucket. Lots of things, lots of activity going on there, which explains why we have so many ideas and competing discussions today, because we're doing a lot. We really are. Okay, collaborative case planning. I'm not going to go over this too far, but basically we took that on and we did develop a policy. It went into effect on July 1. The one piece about that policy that is still hanging out there is right now it applies to high risk only, that you have to case plan with people who are high risk only. Our original recommendation was for medium and high risk, but because of capacity constraints, we couldn't do medium right away. And so the commissioner asked us to submit a report, a year after implementation on readiness for moving to medium. So that is a deliverable in our future. And so I put it on the sequence here so that we don't forget it. Addressing supervision conditions. We were asked to think about limiting standard conditions required for all individuals, looking at supervision conditions and making them match the needs of the individual. We passed on that last year. We basically have not started it. We didn't really know what to do with it. But we also, when we originally passed on it, we did not have judges, prosecutors, or defense attorneys on CSAC, and we do now. So I do think we need to get this on the agenda and talk about what an approach might be for thinking through that as a a future action. And now that we have more expertise at our fingertips to help with those discussions. So I put it back on just to remind us that it's there. Number 5 is the gender responsive, culturally appropriate, and trauma informed services. EBP has been working on that for a while and has had, we've had a lot of discussion, really good discussion about it. Again, I didn't actually know how to guess on a timeline for this one, so I just put a note here that we need to request a timeline from EBP advisory, and once we have that, we can update this. Delivery 7 is performance indicators for supervision. Okay, so here's what happened here. There's 2 tracks that I want to call attention to on this one. So the first one is the statute calls out specific data that the DOC is supposed to report on annually to the legislature. We were, CSAC actually looked at all those things and did recommend that DOC pull in whatever data it doesn't have into the upload that we get from everybody's CSTS so that we could begin reporting on those things. We were in the middle of that project when a new opportunity arose. I've reported on this before, but it's been a while, where CSTS was interested in sort of taking the technology to the next level, creating a data lake that they could build better reporting off of for all of their clients, and that DOC could tap into then to get the data that it needs for this annual reporting. That is in process, like the data lake is being built. I don't have an exact update on that one. I don't know, Carter, if you know anything more than I do. So we need to get a, that whole piece, that report is on hold while we're waiting for that infrastructure to be developed. And then once we have that, we can go back. DOC can then start to build the connection it needs to pull the data that it needs. I actually tried to reach out to Dylan, who is heading up the data committee within the CSTS structure, because I know that they're also working on best ways to present the information. But the 2 of us just didn't connect. Our schedules were not conducive to talking, so we didn't actually connect on it. But I do have it as a to-do to connect with him and find out how they're doing on that end. And then I can try to bring back a better update on timing with the infrastructure. So that's one level of it. The other level of it, though, is that we should be developing key metrics for each policy. And we have toyed with that idea before, but we haven't actually done it. And it's in the statute. I completely missed that it actually is in there. So we should take a look back at the policies that we have and try to figure out, like, what is at least one key metric that we could be expecting from everybody on each policy that would help us understand how well those policies are going statewide. And I think that would be actually a great metric to include in comprehensive plans going forward. So that's a thing we need to work on. And probably an expectation that we should start to give all of our policy developers too. Deliverable 8 was statewide training. We developed that policy for adult, main requirements for people doing at least adult supervision. I'm not sure if there's any tweaks that would need to happen for juvenile supervision, but we put it in place. That one is done. Deliverable 10, plan to eliminate the financial penalty for early discharge. We actually had a subcommittee working on that early days, went through a whole bunch of stuff, and then realized it was just integrally connected to the workload study. So as a committee, we pushed that into the workload study space. And so I would expect to see information coming back on that as the workload study progresses, which deliverable 11 is the workload study itself. And so that's been in progress for some time. A lot of it being like the whole RFP process was up front too. So that's why the bar is really long. But we just heard the update. So we're expecting to see some information come back this fall. And then we really have to think about, we'll have some to-dos, right? That's why there's a dotted box here. What are we going to do with that information? That's the next step. And I didn't put it on here, but the statute does anticipate a workload study happening on a regular cadence. I think, I forgot how often it is. Might be every 5 years as well. And then we have a responsibility to always work with the DOC to review that workload study. So that is our sequencing document, and I hope that that wasn't too fast and actually makes some sense to people. And I hope that this is helpful. Any questions? All right. I will stop sharing.
Kelly, one thing you kind of triggered it when you were talking about the sequencing and juveniles being part of that process. So maybe when we do that RFP, if we could include juveniles when we're looking at creating a risk needs assessment tool for Minnesota, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel down the road.
Would the first question be validate the YLS CMI to see if we even need to do that? A separate RFP that would tell us the same things Dr. Hamilton would. What if it is different and it's working far better? Then we would not need to go down that road.
Yeah.
Okay. So validating the YLS, actually like kicking that off would be good too.
And I'm just assuming that all agencies are using the YLS.
They're not.
So
And that's where my brain was going, because I know when we're in the case planning phase 2 module, whatever, Hennepin County was just finishing up the REACT, and they found at that time lots of, in their estimation, enough issues where they created their own assessment. And so I think it's worthwhile to certainly, even before we validate, to kick around, what's out there.
yeah, I agree with that. All right. So moving on to other business, we have CSAC, DOC Commissioner relationship. This was brought up at the last meeting. The conversation about, submitting a report to the commissioner like we did before, and also commissioner's expectations. So I guess I'll turn it over to Kelly and Carter if you have feedback or comments.
I feel like I'm talking way too much today. All right. However, yeah, so what is interesting, if you look at our statute again, it has like a one-time conversation with the commissioner, but it also required us at one point to review, what should a long-term group look like and do and all that. And we did recommend that this group be the group that we stay functioning, that we continue the relationship, and that we continue to work together on issues related to community supervision. So what that leaves unaddressed is what's that relationship with the commissioner, between this group and the commissioner. And, I did have a conversation, just sort of like a scoping conversation with the commissioner to throw some ideas around. And, I think that number one, this group's, one of our primary roles is policy development, and that we will continue to develop and review policy and all of that stuff. And so we're thinking that for policies, like those are things that this group has representation from all 3 delivery systems, including DOC. So we should have a direct line to the policy process. So basically, if we're working on policy and we're developing policy, we don't need to send it to the commissioner to say, can we have a policy? We need to send it into our exec council at DOC to say, here's the policy. So we can basically retain that autonomy to put the policies in place in these different areas, and to sort of have a direct line in. But then there will be other issues that are more in that recommendation space. So for instance, like if the idea today had been to delay the DWI screening DWI cases, we would have wanted to send a recommendation to the commissioner and have that back and forth with the commissioner. We have in the future, the commissioner has asked for a report on feasibility to move to medium risk for case planning, right? So we should close that loop and follow that. So there's some of these things where it is more of a reporting structure. So, thinking that potentially, Molly brought this up last time, like at least an annual report of sort of what are the activities that we've done and any recommendations that we would have for future action. But if we need something faster, then we just can send a recommendation up. So like the chairs would be responsible for that if there's something that we need some feedback on more quickly. I'm just throwing these ideas out as possibilities right now. They're not set in stone. This isn't, this doesn't have to be how this group wants to work with the Commissioner of Corrections. But either way, what I think we have to do is to go back to our bylaws and write it in. Because right now, we just have really that initial report in the bylaws. We haven't addressed the what next piece. So what I would suggest is that we do take a run at putting some of these ideas into the bylaws and then review it as a committee or as a committee, and make a recommendation that that's how the bylaws change. Ultimately, this is like a group that was designed to be advisory to the Commissioner of Corrections. So that's why it should be represented there, like what that relationship is. Does that make sense? Okay. So I can take a run at it, and I can work with the chairs on taking a run at what that could look like and bring it back to a future meeting, and we can work on it. Yeah.
Great.
Should we also consider, and maybe you already have in your conversations with the commissioner, but how future legislative initiatives or mandates that come regarding community supervision that come typically through DOC or through the commissioner, how that would intersect with this group in the future. So, there's a new policy directive from the legislature. It goes to the Commissioner of Corrections. Does that get delegated to CSAC for development or exploration? Or is it a direct line to CSAC through the statutory language? I'm just thinking in the future. Right now we have all these deliverables, but they'll be wrapped up here at some point. And then when the next set of expectations comes, how does that fit with the establishment of CSAC in the future?
It's a really great question. I would love for your recommendation on that.
Well, I guess if the way I see it, the way that I guess historically those types of initiatives have come, if we have state mandates regarding community supervision, typically I sort of fall to the commissioner for policy direction, and then the delivery systems sort of, I think, come together and collaborate generally on how we're going to implement things. But now that this is an established body, is this something where this is where it would come through the commissioner, via the commissioner by delegation to this group, if it's not explicitly stated in statute that it's coming here. You know, I'm just thinking, because there will be some new initiative that we'll have to tackle in the future legislatively. And how do we get it here to this table if this is where we think it should be vetted and developed?
So Corey, you bring up an excellent point. And for example, I mean, this is hitting home to all our agencies across the state, is the age of delinquency raising from 10, 11, 12-year-olds till now 13 years of age. And so that's going to change probation supervision across the state of Minnesota and what that looks like. And, you know, what does that look like in courts, health and human services, the impact. And so I think there's a lot of counties that are kind of like in law enforcement and you know, everybody involved is like, what do we do? There's a lot of questions behind that. And so if there's things that are moving through, I think, you know, this would be a perfect spot, a place to have those conversations. If there's legislation that's going to impact probation, excuse me, if that could get kind of, I don't want to say vetted through or go through the Commissioner of Corrections, and then, you know, he would pass it to us to have those conversations and provide recommendations and then go before. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a wish. But I think this group would be a perfect place to have those conversations and to give recommendations to going forward. Because I think for the most part, you know, yeah, we don't want a 10, 11, 12-year-old being in the juvenile probation world. But what do you do if a 10, 11, 12-year-old commits a murder? So like those conversations, what are we doing? So you bring up an excellent point, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, like that particular example is a tough one, right? Because it's really been given to DHS to implement, or CF, the new DCYF, to implement that law change. It affects us, and we have concerns about how it's being implemented, but we may not have the table to actually make those discussions happen. But I see your point, Kevin. I'd say, like, in terms of, you know, during the session, this wouldn't be the group for feedback to be generated from, because we don't meet quickly enough or frequently enough to be able to be nimble during the session. So I think we're back to, like, all of our different delivery systems have to be the ones to be in there talking when there's things on the table that are happening that we're concerned about. But after session, when something is being implemented, if the commissioner's been assigned to implement it, which will happen a lot because it's the only state agency that the legislature has to sort of flex that muscle, right? I don't see anything wrong with asking, you know, CSAC to take some ownership in that if it's something that can be done on our timeline. You know, it sort of depends on, I think it's going to depend on that timeline too. Like, how did they give us 2 months to implement it, or did they give us, you know, as much time as we need to implement it, right? So yeah, I do like that idea.
I do too, and I think I think that scope and ability are like that. That's what comes to my mind. It's like, I don't disagree with Kevin's concerns about for example, that's just an example. But, you know, maybe the scope is as it relates to the things that we're working on here, or, and then, you know, I think we'd have to take a look at what are we able to do in the amount of time that we have too. So.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, good discussions today. So we are moving here towards the end of the agenda. So I'm moving it to public comment. Don, is there anybody in the?
We do have someone on. If they are interested in making any public comments, please raise your hand and I'll elevate you up. I am not seeing anything.
Okay. All right, then. That brings us to the end of the meeting then. And so we don't need to get a motion to adjourn. We will just adjourn the meeting, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.